On the 22nd of May, 2021, 172 runners set out along a course that ran through the hills and valleys of the Yellow River Stone Forest National Geological Area in China. It was a chilly, overcast day and the road ahead was a long one. They were participating in a 100-kilometer or 62-millimeter ultramarathon. They expected to struggle, they expected to be pushed to their limits. Many might have had doubts about whether they would finish the entire course, but none among them were prepared for how the race would actually end, with nobody reaching the finish line and 1 in every 8 competitors lying dead along the way. An ultramarathon is any foot race longer than the typical marathon distance of 42.2 kilometer or 26 mile. Most ultramarathons are at least 50 kilometer or 31 mile, but many are much longer. Races can last for days at a time, covering distances of hundreds of kilometers. As well as the incredible distances involved, ultramarathons are often organized in locations with challenging terrain, mountainous regions, desert areas, or routes which require runners to wade across rivers and streams. The course of the Gansu Ultramarathon, which had taken place in China each year since 2018, was considered fairly challenging, but not amongst the most extreme of races. The course was 100 kilometer, or around 62 mile in length, winding through the rocky mountainous terrain of the Yellow River Stone Forest National Geological Area. Most of the course was completely treeless and generally very exposed. At points, competitors would have to navigate rocky areas and use their hands to scramble up steep inclines. Given the distance and terrain involved, it was expected that most competitors would take at least 20 hours to finish the course. Those who did reach the finish line would receive a bounty of $1,600 yuan each, the equivalent of about $250 in 2021. There would, of course, be several stops along the way to the finish line, checkpoints at which competitors could rest and possibly even pick up supplies. At checkpoint 6, for example, there was a changing station where runners could get first aid, pick up a change of clothes, and restock their supplies. Not all checkpoints offered such luxuries, however. Some other checkpoints had little more than some crates of bottled water by way of amenities. 172 competitors signed up for the race, elite and amateur runners alike. The only entry requirement was that they had completed one similar ultramarathon before. Many of those who signed up had done more than one, and some had dozens under their belts. Among the notable athletes taking part was 3 one-year-old ultramarathon champion Liang Jing, whose record was so impressive that he was known by other runners as General Liang, a reference to the perception that he was a leader in ultramarathon circles. He had emerged victorious from many tough challenges before, including a 2018 ultramarathon across the Gobi Desert. Another runner thought to be a serious contender was 3 four-year-old Huang Guanjun, who had won the marathon event at the 2019 Chinese National Paralympic Games following a medical accident when he was a child. He had limited hearing and was unable to speak, but was an extremely strong and accomplished long-distance runner nonetheless. Most competitors arrived in the area a day or two before the start of the race. They stayed in towns and villages close to the entrance of the Yellow River Stone Forest National Geological Area through which the winding course ran. As runners checked in ahead of the race, the weather in the area was pleasant, warm and clear, with gentle sunshine and only the slightest suggestion of clouds. It looked like perfect weather for the race. Most runners had packed a backpack with extra supplies and layers of supplementary clothing. This would be transported to checkpoint 6 for them to pick up at the halfway point of the race, if they needed it. For the most part, given the pleasant weather, runners chose to leave their cold weather gear inside their backpacks. The only thing they were mandated to bring in case of an emergency was a compact space blanket. Runners were also given GPS devices by organizers. Each GPS device featured an emergency call button, but few runners anticipated actually needing them. By the day of the race, the 22nd of May 2021, the weather had worsened. The day dawned much colder than the one before. As runners lined up at the starting line wearing light sports gear, such as shorts and t-shirts, many were seen to be visibly shivering. Still, there was no cause for alarm. They anticipated warming up as the race progressed and believed that the weather might also improve. The organizers had not briefed them on any expected extreme weather conditions. Though cold and a little uncomfortable, the main feeling was a sense of excitement for the race ahead. When runners set off at 9 a.m., the temperature was around 7 degrees Celsius or 44.6 degrees Fahrenheit. As the runners ascended into the hills, passing checkpoints 1 and 2, the temperature dropped, falling until, with wind chill accounted for, they were running in near freezing conditions. Rain began to fall, and was soon followed by slush and freezing rain. Fog descended and strong gusts of wind buffeted runners as they made their way along the exposed hilly course. The section between checkpoints 2 and 3 was one of the most steep and most exposed parts of the course. By the time the lead runners reached it, the wind and the rain were severe, obscuring visibility and hammering them relentlessly, making it difficult to see and even more difficult to navigate. Many trail markers had blown away in the wind, and there were no staff or marshals stationed on this section of the route to offer guidance. The runners were on their own. Faced with these harsh conditions and cold temperatures, some runners turned back. Others pushed onwards. Some hoped they would push through and reach a more sheltered part of the course, while others feared that turning back and attempting to descend would be too risky given the change in conditions. The further on they ran, however, the worse the weather became. At 11:50 a.m., the first runner used their emergency GPS device to call for help, but received no response. At around the same time, other runners started turning to their personal devices to ask for assistance. The race had a WeChat group into which runners posted updates and photographs of themselves huddling on the mountainside. However, in the most brutal section of the course between checkpoints 2 and 3, there was very little mobile phone signal. This communication black spot was something organizers had not been aware of and runners had not anticipated. Now it meant that those most in need of help were stranded in a place where they could not call for it. The situation was becoming desperate. Runners resorted to the emergency blankets they had been instructed to carry, but these were whipped away or even shredded by the force of the wind. And even when they managed to hold on to them, the thin foil blankets did little to protect against the howling wind and freezing rain. Runners took shelter behind rocks or in caves. Some huddled together for warmth. Others, overwhelmed, collapsed and fell unconscious, stricken by hypothermia. Race organizers had hired a private company named Blue Sky Rescue to recover and provide first aid for runners who got into difficulty on the course. However, they were equipped to rescue individual runners who suffered illness or injury and did not have the resources to assist the dozens of people now in danger. The Blue Sky Rescue team hiked up along the course and were able to escort 18 runners back down, but there were many more who still needed help. Overwhelmed, they called in further support from the emergency services. While firefighters made their way out to the remote location, a local shepherd named Zhu Kemming stumbled across some runners in distress. He was reluctantly out in the adverse weather to oversee the grazing of his sheep and was extremely surprised to encounter a group of strangers dressed only in shorts and t-shirts, some of them clearly suffering from hypothermia. He escorted 6 runners to the cave where he usually rested when out working on the mountain, started a fire, and then headed back out to look for others. The next 3 runners he found, however, were already dead. Zhu was forced to take shelter from the weather for a few hours, but as soon as conditions had improved enough for him to do so, he hiked downhill until he had mobile phone signal and called a contact at a nearby village. The residents of Changzheng village were aware that something was amiss in the hills above their home, but had been told only that some athletes required emergency supplies. Zhu's call made them aware that people were in immediate danger, and within hours around 50 villagers had gathered supplies and hiked up to checkpoint 3 to look for survivors. The villagers arrived on scene an hour before the emergency services with superior knowledge of the area. The villagers were able to navigate well and found themselves assisting firefighters who, despite better equipment, got repeatedly lost and struggled with the terrain. By the next day, the rescue operation was over and the final death toll was known. 21 runners had died and many more were hospitalized. Just 4 runners had made it through to checkpoint 4. The rest had either been stranded by the weather, had turned back of their own accord, or had not survived. The disaster had claimed the lives of professional and amateur runners alike. Indeed, both Liang Jing and Huang Guanjun, despite extensive experience and peak physical fitness, lost their lives as a result of hypothermia out on the Ganu ultramarathon course. In the aftermath of this unprecedented disaster, there was fierce criticism of the lack of emergency planning. Race organizers had not arranged for checkpoints in some of the most remote parts of the route to be staffed. They had not planned for contingencies like extreme weather, and they had not required runners to carry sufficient survival equipment to actually survive a dramatic change in conditions. The race had been organized by the local government of the prefecture, in which it took place with assistance from the Yellow River Stone Forest National Geological Area. They had relied on a sports marketing company to handle the logistics of the race, while they focused on promoting it and using the event to help the economic development of the area. 5 individuals who had helped to organize the race were charged with dereliction of duty or negligence and received prison sentences of up to 5 years each. Further to this, any sports which did not have established national safety standards were banned until such standards could be agreed upon. In the years that followed, however, safety standards for ultramarathons were established in China and elsewhere around the world. Now, in many countries, it is mandatory for race organizers to make plans for extreme weather events and to ensure that competitors carry basic survival equipment with them when they take part. With these new measures in place, marathons and ultramarathons have continued to gain popularity in China. There are now dozens of ultramarathons which take place around the country. The organization of each and every one of which is informed by the disaster which took place during the 2021 Gansu Ultramarathon. Music.